Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us, and welcome to today's webinar, Bill and Ed's excellent Microsoft adventure, Why Upgrade to Dynamics GP 2018. My name is Petra Eimiller, Marketing and Business Development Manager here at AKA Enterprise Solutions, and I'll be moderating the presentation. Before we get started, I just wanted to run through a couple of housekeeping notes. To optimize the viewing quality of the presentation, please close any programs you have running besides GoToWebinar. Use one monitor for the webinar. If you experience any visual or audio issues, please contact GoTo directly at support.logmeinc.com/GoToWebinar/contact us. It's right there on the screen. If you have any issues, please don't worry. This webinar is being recorded, and we will send you the recording in the next few business days. Also, I wanted to point out the questions pane of the control panel in the upper right corner of your screen. Using this functionality, you may submit questions at any time during the presentation. We will address as many as possible as we go. We want to keep this interactive. If we don't get to your question, we will do our best to answer it in the designated Q&A session at the end of the presentation or follow up with you after the call. Today's session will be presented by Bill Vicino, Senior Technical Consultant, and Ed Lubriel, Lead Functional Consultant at AK Enterprise Solutions. So who are Bill and Ed? Bill is MCSC certified with SQL Server DBA credentials and has over 20 years of experience installing, upgrading, and supporting Dynamics GP. He also has extensive background in deploying and supporting applications in RDS, Citrix, and Azure environments. And who's Ed? With a background in accounting, Ed has 22 years of experience in Dynamics GP consulting, implementation, and support, as well as conducting report analysis and design. In terms of what we'll cover today, we'll start with a quick intro about AKA. Then we'll continue with Dynamics GP 2018 technological advances. Next, we'll cover Dynamics GP 2018 new features. Then the advantages of moving Dynamics GP to the cloud. Then we'll answer any remaining questions in the Q&A, and we'll close with a call to action. Now I'd like to hand things over to Bill Vicino. Bill?
Wow, thank you, Petra. I appreciate the introduction. I guess we want to move on to the next screen, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the highlights of what AK does. I think most of you are already familiar with who we are and what we do, but for those of you who aren't, I just want to point out a few of the more important details on this slide. I think first of all, you should know we're 100% Microsoft focused. We're gold certified. You know, we're skilled in CRM, ERP, and cloud implementations. We've been in the business for over 25 years. We have 250 customers and 125 team members. And I think the best thing about our team and the most important thing is we've grown organically over time. And you know, the vast majority of our team members are really well experienced and specialized in the areas of focus. A couple of things you may not know about AK, especially if you're primarily a GP client, is that we do have a strong CRM team. So if CRM is something you're looking at implementing, we can certainly help you get that up and running. And another thing we do really well, especially as everyone's moving to the cloud, we have a cloud practice internally here, so we can move GP to the cloud for you, and we'll talk about that a little more later, but we can also move other workloads to the cloud. So I think most businesses are looking at moving some, if not all of their workloads to the cloud, and that's something that we have an entire team that we've put together to do that. And then finally, we do a lot of BI work, not just around GP, but if you have other data sources and databases, applications out there, and you want to put together some dashboards and some centralized reports, we can do that for you as well. Okay, and so the first thing we're going to talk about is some of the technological advances that come along with GP 2018. And so I guess one of the things that comes up is, you know, why do I need to upgrade, or what are the reasons to upgrade? Well, I think one of the driving forces is to remain compliant. I think most organizations get audited. One of the first things auditors ask you, are you on a supported version? What version are you on? How often have you patched it? You know, especially if you're either, you know, held to SOX compliance or SEC or FCC, other organizations, it's really tight that you need to be on, you know, a supported platform of GP. One thing to note is mainstream support for GP 2013 ends a little bit later this year in October. So I guess the question is, okay, GP 2013 mainstream support ends, what does that mean? Well, one thing is you will no longer be on an officially supported platform, which could have, like I just talked about, some sort of compliance issues for you. Another thing that happens is Microsoft will stop putting out service packs. So if for some reason, you know, Windows Workstation 12 comes out next year, and you want to put GP 2013 on it, it might not be supported, it might not even work. So going forward, Microsoft's not going to keep updating the GP 2013 platform to remain consistent, current with new versions of Windows. Another thing that happens is GP 2013 won't have tax updates anymore. So if you're using payroll, well, you're going to have a problem because the payroll tax tables won't get updated anymore after October of this year. The good news or the bright spot is we're going to continue to support you. So if you're on GP 2013 and you're not going to be able to upgrade by October of this year, that's all right. You can open a support case with us and we'll handle it and manage it internally. Another issue is that mainstream support for SQL Server 2008 R2 ends next year. So again, you always want to be on a supported version of SQL Server. One of the things they do is they provide patches that can improve performance and more importantly, minimize the vulnerabilities. There's a lot of malware out there these days, and you always want to be on a supported patch version of SQL. And finally, extended support. So this is not just mainstream support. Extended support for Windows 2008 R2 ends in 2020. So essentially, there'll be no more patching. And then I think if you remember earlier this year, or you may remember, there were quite a few instances of ransomware and malware attacking Windows XP because it was no longer supported. Well, sort of the same thing's going to happen to Windows 2008 R2. There'll be no more security patches and updates for it. And so that's kind of like the red flag, and all the hackers will try to attack the system at that point because Microsoft's no longer going to officially support it and patch it, so it's really low-lying fruit. So you want to definitely be off Windows Server 2008 R2 before 2020, if at all possible. Okay, so then if you're going to upgrade GP, more often than not, you're going to upgrade the infrastructure around it, which includes Windows Server. So I think there's some nice features in Windows Server 2016, and I'm sure if you're doing this on premise, your IT folks will be really happy that you're upgrading GP and allowing them to move it over to a new Windows platform. Like I talked about before, Windows Server 2016 offers improved security. In this era of ransomware and malware and viruses, you want to be on the latest patched up platform, and moving to Windows Server 2016 allows you to do that. There's also virtualization enhancements so that VMs running on Windows 2016 are more stable and more efficient and easier to support. PowerShell functionality is improved, and what this does is it allows your IT people to better manage the machines and remotely manage the machines in your environment. So again, moving to a new version of GP allows you to have a newer infrastructure, including Windows 2016. There's new storage options available as well, so data volumes can be larger in size and they're going to perform better. And then finally, you're going to have enhanced stability, less reboots, less software patching. It's going to be a more up-to-date platform. It's going to be more convenient for you to use and less obtrusive in GP. And again, just like there's some nice advantages to moving to Windows 2016, there are new versions of SQL, namely 2014, 2016, and 2017, that are all supported for Microsoft Dynamics GP 2018. One of my favorite advances is the always-on high availability capabilities within SQL Server. It's kind of really developed over the years, and at this point, it's pretty straightforward process of setting up a SQL Server. And if you want to set up a high availability set, you have a SQL Server in another area of the country or another time zone, so that you have that sort of disaster recovery ability, and it's kind of baked into SQL right now. Another advantage is that SQL has gotten, more efficient and better memory utilization. So again, anytime you query a database, the more efficient your use of memory is, the better the queries are going to run, and the more responsive GP and SQL are going to be. I would say probably one of my favorite features baked into SQL these days is the ability to back up databases directly to an Azure URL. So I think many of you who we've probably implemented GP for, we have, SQL Server backups to flat files on your server, or maybe to a network share. Well, this is kind of taken to the next logical step, where instead of backing up locally, or in addition to backing up locally, maybe you could back up something to an Azure backup vault. So then not only are you backing up your data, but you're also moving it off-site at the same time. It's very efficient. And the nice thing about it is Azure, you know, the storage in Azure is very inexpensive. So you can back it up seamlessly, inexpensively to a Microsoft hosting facility. And finally, the SQL Server reporting server interface has gotten a little more streamlined and updated. So I think anyone who's using the SSRS reports in GP will appreciate that. And if you're not using them, you know, as part of the upgrade process, we'll deploy them for you so that when you're on 2018, you at least could take a good look at them and see if they make sense to use the SSRS reports that are baked in the GP going forward. So at this point, I want to turn it over to Ed, who's going to get into more of the GP 2018 application features and the new abilities within the application.
Thank you very much, Bill. Before we begin, I just want to mention a couple of things. One is, in the interest of time, I will not be demoing the features that we're going to discuss here, but if anybody has any questions, please feel free to ask as I'm going through them, or contact us if you, after you know, some point you guys want some more detail. We can always schedule some one-on-one time to go over specific features that you guys are interested in. Keep in mind that if and when you guys decide to upgrade to 2018, as part of the upgrade, one of the things we do is schedule a what's new training session where we go over all the new features that are specific to the modules that your company is using. So just keep that in mind. Most of the features I want to talk about here, and keep in mind these are not all the features, these are some of the highlights between version 2015 and 2018. So most of the features here are highlights of between those two versions. For those of you who might be already in some either 2015 or 16, you might be aware of some of these features already. Some of these features also, even though they existed before, they have been enhanced in 2018, and some of the features are specific to just 2018. Okay, so let's get started with the first one, which is document attachment, and this has been around for a couple of versions. And document attachment, as it states, allows you the ability to attach documents in GP on a number of different levels. It replaces the OLE notes in 2015. There was actually, before the document attachment functionality was available in GP, there was a way to attach documents in GP using OLE, called OLE notes. It was little, you know, it required a couple of steps. It wasn't, it was possible, it just wasn't the best way to do it. So document attachment makes it much easier to do it. You can also have multiple attachments to, you know, within a master record or a transaction. And you can even scan the documents into GP if you have a scanner. The documents are stored securely in the company database, in your SQL database. So they will be backed up as part of your standard SQL backup. The one thing to keep in mind, since they are being stored in your SQL database, they will take some space depending on how many attachments you have. I have not run into any clients that have an issue with that, but just something to be aware of, that just make sure you got enough space if you're going to be attaching a lot of documents.
Yeah, and this is Bill. From an IT perspective, I think there is a big advantage to having those documents in your database. I've seen a number of times where documents are sort of scattered all over network shares and local machines, and basically within GP, there's a pointer to those places, but then someone accidentally deletes or renames a document. Guess what? Your connection within GP no longer works. So when it's in the database, it's there, it's secure for good. And I think, you know, I've migrated a lot of users from OLE notes to document attach, and I'll tell you what, people that were using it like it better, and people that were never using the notes feature in GP start using it after we do the upgrade. It's really I think one of the worthwhile reasons and reasons to do an upgrade. Yeah, and a couple of other things regarding document attachment is I see it used for the clients that are starting to use it. The one area I do see it used a lot now is on the vendor side. You can attach W9. So this way you have easy access to the W9 on the vendor side. You can also do it on the customer side as well, and also on transactions. You can do it on AP invoices. You know, when you enter an AP invoice, you could attach it there. You can also in 2018 do it on a GL entry, so that if you ever have any, you know, if you make an adjustment and you want to back up, there's some sort of backup, an Excel file that explains the entry, you can do that as well. So definitely something that is worth looking into.
Next feature we'll talk about is called the WebClient. For those of you who never heard of the WebClient is the browser-based version of GP. Basically, you're logging into a browser and you're running GP from the browser. It's been around for a couple of versions as well. 2018 has been enhanced to streamline it, and also the performance is definitely better in 2018. It does run using the HTML5. So before it was using I forget what was it. I forget what it was using before, Bill, but I know that was
Silverlight.
Silverlight, right?
Yeah,
Silverlight,
it had to be an Internet Explorer using a Silverlight add-in, which
right.
was sometimes problematic. Yeah.
And it also runs on the iOS or Android machine. And there is one thing I would mention is that I typically don't see it used for a day-to-day user, like someone that's using it GP every day. It probably works best for remote users that just salespeople or alike that just need to connect to GP remotely. And they can pretty much do anything that a standard user can do. They can do inquiries, they could run reports, they can do transactions. But assuming that you don't have remote desktop or terminal services or Azure, the web client is something that you might want to take a look at if you have remote users. But again, for day-to-day users, because there still are some limitations like with Integration Manager, VBA, and some third parties don't support the web client. It might not be a fully functional for the day-to-day users, but it's definitely something to keep in mind for any remote users.
Yeah, and I would say, it's been my experience that in the past, some people tried to adopt this early or test it early, like in GP 2013 or 2015, and they had sort of a bad experience. It left a bad taste in the mouth. I think this version, which is HTML5 based, it's cleaner, faster, it's got a better look, and it's got a little more functionality than it did previously. So it might be a good time, if you're looking at doing a GP 2018 upgrade, to kind of revisit this feature, because it might work out well for even if it didn't maybe work out in a previous iteration.
The next thing we'll talk about is SSRS reports. For those of you who've used it, you know what it is. SSRS stands for SQL Server Reporting Services Reports. Basically, it's just a different type of report that you could run within GP. You can actually even run it outside of GPs. The reports run through a browser. So as long as you have the URL to the report, you can run it. You could just go to the browser, and as long as you go to the URL, you can run the report. And for the most part, a lot of the main standard GP reports also have an SSRS version of the same report. A couple of the benefits of SSRS reports is one, that you can export these reports very easily into Excel to PDF, and they look exactly how the report looks. For anyone that's tried to export a report, a standard GP report into Excel, sometimes it looks okay, and sometimes it's garbage because of the fact that it has multiple levels and grouping and subtotaling and all that kind of stuff. So the SSRS reports definitely solves that issue. The other thing that's benefit of SSRS reports is that it is using the SQL report builder. So for anybody that knows how to use that, it just opens up a lot of additional functionality and things that you can do in terms of report creation. Standard GP reports uses a report writer, so it's a little bit limited in terms of what you can do. With SSRS reports, it opens up a whole new world of things that you can do from a reporting standpoint. In 2018, they have enhanced the SSRS reports so that the performance has also improved, and they've also updated some of the reports, so something to keep in mind. On the AP side, AP and AR side, actually, they've added a nice new feature on the inquiry screens. So on there's two screens, transaction by customer and transaction by vendor, very common screens that are used from an inquiry standpoint. They added a couple of sorting options that people, I've heard a number of people request this. One is to sort it by amount. So for those of you who use the inquiry screens, you know that you can sort it by date, you can sort it by number, you can sort it by type, but now you can sort it by amount, original amount, and you can also sort it by unapplied amount. The other thing that you can do is you can also sort the date or any of these other options, either ascending or descending. Prior to 2018, when you did a sort based on document date, it always shows you the last it showed you the oldest one on top. You have to scroll down to the bottom to see the most recent. Now you can change that to show you the most recent transactions on top, so you don't have to scroll down. So that's definitely a nice new feature that they've added in 2018. And again, that's on the AP and the AR side. Another option that's new in 2018 is the ability to, on the vendor card, to decide whether you want to pay the vendor one check per invoice or just one check in total. So this feature was actually was available on prior to 2018, where you can actually create a check batch, and when the check batch, you can say you want to create one check batch, and you can say that you wanted to pay create one check per invoice. But that was on the batch level. Now in 2018, you could do it on the vendor level. So within the same batch, you can have one vendor that you pay one check, and then you can have another vendor that you could pay one check per invoice. So there's a setting now in 2018 on the vendor maintenance screen that lets you dictate whether you want one payment per vendor or one payment per invoice. And then when you do the check run, it'll look at the vendor to determine if it should pay just one check or one check per invoice. For those of you who use SmartList, and that should be everybody, when you create a SmartList favorite, you now have the ability to password protect that favorite, which means that if anybody wants to modify the favorite or if anybody wants to delete the favorite, they'll need to know the password. You don't have to use the password, you can leave it blank, but if you do password protect any favorite, then any modifications or deletions will require someone to enter the password. So that's a good way to protect passwords, SmartList favorites that you don't want anybody changing or deleting. On the GL side, they've combined the GL summary and detail increase into one screen. And this, again, this has been around for a couple of versions. Before they added this feature, you had a separate increase screen, GL increase screen for open years, and a separate GL increase screen for historical years. Now it's one screen. Within the one screen, you're now able to see open and closed years. You don't have to open up two separate windows to go across years. Workflow has been around since I think it started in version 2013 R2. And for each version that upgrade that Microsoft has provided, they've had some additional enhancements to workflow. They've always added some additional features. 2018 is no different. So for those of you who are not aware what workflow is just the process of someone entering something and having it needing for that to be approved. So for example, one of the workflows that they have in GP is the vendor workflow. So I can go and enter a vendor and submit the vendor, and the vendor will have to be approved before you can post a transaction to the vendor. So that's an example of the workflow. GP has a number of different workflows. There's the vendor workflow. You have workflow in AP transactions. You also have in the purchase orders, requisitions. You also have it on the GL batches and AP batches as well. So all those kind of transactions you can set up. You can set all of the workflows. You can set up just one. It's up to you which workflow you want. In 2018, they actually added a new workflow for GL accounts, which I like because now when someone you can set it up that when someone enters a new GL account, that account gets reviewed and approved before you can post it. Again, this is totally optional. You don't need to set up workflows. In 2018, they've going back to some of the a couple of other things in the workflows. What's nice about the workflows is that when someone submits something to be approved, again, going back to my example in terms of entering a vendor, if I enter a vendor and the workflow is turned on, I have to submit the vendor. The approver, you can set it up that the approver gets an email, and within the email, they'll have the information as to what they need to be approved. That approver doesn't have to be a GP user. As long as that approver is in your domain as a network user, you can set it up that the approver will get an email, and there's some web services that has to be set up, but you can set it up that they can actually approve within the email. They can approve what's the vendor, let's say in this case, or if it's a transaction, they can actually approve it within the email. Great feature. And in 2018, they actually added a couple of things besides the new workflow for AP. They've added a reminder email. So if, let's say, I submit a vendor, and let's say Bill is the approver, and he hasn't approved it in a couple of days, you can set it up that it will send Bill a reminder email to say, look, Bill, you forgot to whatever, please approve, and so and so. There's also now in 2018, which is one that wasn't available before, a workflow history report. So you get to see a report of, because that's one of the other nice features of the workflow, is that there is the audit in terms of GP will remember or store who entered the transaction, who approved it, who rejected it. So you have that workflow history. Now it's available in the report, which it wasn't before. And they've added a Word template for batch approvals. So anybody that if you wanted to do it on the GL or AP batch level, the approver will get actually a Word document that shows them all. It's basically an edit list that shows them all the transactions and the batches.
Yeah, and I guess if anyone's been using GP for a long time, you may have used the Business Portal many years ago, which was sort of the precursor to workflow. And the big advantage here is with Business Portal, you had to install SharePoint and do a lot of configuration and a lot of work to do. Here, the workflow is kind of baked in the GP. It's just a matter of setting up your hierarchy and users. It's really not a lot of work to do. Whereas, if you had a bad experience with the Business Portal, it seemed like a little intimidating to set that up. You can set up the GP workflow pretty easily. And like Ed said, you could do the approvals via email. So, the high-level managers who might approve these things don't really have to know how to log into GP and do anything. It's pretty simple just to click OK or approve.
Yeah, and one last thing with the workflow, as Bill mentioned, you determine in terms of what the hierarchy is and how many approvers. It could be one approver, it can have multiple approvers. You also have conditional approving, so you can be based on amounts. So for example, if I enter an AP invoice that's $5,000, it goes to one person or it needs to go to multiple people. So there's a lot of flexibility in terms of what that approval process needs to be. Okay, let's talk about the another feature called Power BI integration. For those of you who don't know what Power BI is simply a reporting application tool from Microsoft that allows you to create reports. And you can create really nice sophisticated reports, dashboards, graphs, that kind of sophisticated reporting. We actually at AKA use it internally as well. There is some setup on the Power BI side. It's a separate application. You register and do all that stuff. And then you create the reports in this Power BI application. Then what you do is you publish those reports, and they go into a specific area that Power BI stores into this dashboard of Power BI. And then those reports that are on your Power BI dashboard, you can expose those reports within GP on your homepage. So in here, for example, you see an example on the right side there of a Power BI report showing me the top customers based on sales life to date. So any Power BI report that you have published, you can expose those and make those visible within their GP homepage. And just a few other highlights in terms of new features between 15 and 18. For those of you who use select checks in GP, you know that you create a batch, you pick all your options, and then let's say you do it by due date or you do it by vendor class. In 2018 now, you have the ability to save those options. So the next time that you create a batch, you can just pick your payment option ID, and all those options will come back. So save you some time doing that. In AP and AR, there's now a new all-in-one view that'll let you. It's similar to the within the transaction by customer and transaction by vendor screen. There's an option now called all-in-one view. It's another way to just view information for a customer vendor. The nice thing about that all-in-one view is that you can actually see multiple transactions in one screen, and within that one screen, you can drill back to see all the whatever transactions that you filtered on. In Smart List, now there is a when you created. Let me just so that you guys are aware, in Smart List favorites, when you created a Smart List favorite, it always defaulted to be visible by system, which means that everybody can see that Smart List favorite. And what ended up happening is I go to a lot of clients where there's like a bunch of favorites and people even don't have no clue who uses them, if anybody uses them. So a lot of that was caused because of the fact that the default option was to save it to system, which means that everybody can see it. So I remember a few clients asking me, is it possible to change that to default to user ID? So now there is an option to change the default visibility option to either system, company, user class, or user ID. For anybody that uses requisitions or plans to use requisitions within GP, as Bill mentioned before, we used to have a business portal process where you can do requisitions outside GP, and it creates the PO. Now within GP, there's a requisition module, and prior to 2018, you could create the requisitions, but you couldn't print the requisitions. Now in 2018, you're able to print the requisitions. In regards to bank rec, for anybody using bank recs and for anybody that is entering cash receipts, you know that when you enter a cash receipt, that you need to do a bank deposit in order for that to show up on your reconciliation. Now you have the ability, there's an option for you to have GP automatically create the bank deposit for you based on the cash receipt. So it bypasses the step of you having to create the bank deposit. It will create it automatically for you. If you're using budgets in GP, there is now a budget import exception report. So you know if you're using budgets, what you have basically is an Excel file. The Excel file has all the accounts, has 12 periods, you have all the amounts. And what you would do is you would just import that into GP using it as a budget wizard import in GP. Prior to, and I believe this was around, I think this started in 2016, prior to 2016, when you imported the budget, if you were missing if there were any accounts in the Excel template that did not exist in GP, you would not get a notification. It would import all the accounts except the ones that didn't exist. And if the account showed up twice on the Excel file, you wouldn't know either. Now, if either of those scenarios exist, GP will print a report telling you, wait, you have this account doesn't exist in GP, or this account shows up twice in the file. And last but not least, in terms of the feature highlights, is one of the issues that we used to have with when someone tried to post a batch, they might get a message saying that this batch is being edited by another user, and it didn't tell you who that other user was. So you either had to go around or try to figure out who was using the batch. Now, as part of the message, this batch is being edited by another user. It tells you who the user is. So now you can just go up to that user and tell them, look, can you close out? I need to post a batch. So those are some of the, again, highlights. There are more. And with that said, unless there are any questions, I will turn it back to Bill to discuss GP 2018 in the cloud.
And just a quick reminder, guys, the attendees on a call, you can submit questions at any time using the panel on the right-hand side. We are trying to keep this interactive, so if anything comes up, feel free to shoot a question in there, and we'll toss it to Bill and Ed. And with that, Bill, go right ahead and talk about GP in the cloud.
Sure, thanks, Petra. So I guess at this point, if you're looking at upgrading GP and you have it on premise right now, you have a decision to make. You can spin up some new servers and move GP, to a new environment and upgrade it, or you might decide to move it to the cloud, which is what a lot of people are doing right now. As a matter of fact, a lot of clients I talk to, before I even mention a cloud option, they ask me, is there a cloud option for GP? And the answer is yes. And essentially it mirrors an on-premise option. So let's go over some of the advantages on a high level real quick, and then we'll dig into a little more detail. One of the big advantages, it's very easy to upgrade things in the cloud because we can spin up servers as needed and perform a test upgrade on them. So if you're thinking about upgrading GP and you're thinking about going to the cloud, it's really good to do both at the same time, because if you upgrade GP, what are you gonna have to do? Go through the upgrade process, do some testing, and then do a live cutover. If you're gonna move to the cloud, what are you gonna do? You're gonna move your data to the cloud, do some testing, and do a live cutover. Well, it probably makes sense to do them both at the same time. It's gonna save you money off your budget, and it's gonna be more efficient. Your end users want to do two sets of testing, so it's always a good time. A couple nice other advantages on a high level in the cloud. It's always up and available. We've had clients call me up sometimes, hey, Bill, my building's doing electrical work this weekend. How do I shut down GP in my server because it's going to be down all weekend? It really stinks because I want to do payroll or something like that, and I'm going to have to stress out on Monday morning. Well, the good news about Azure, it's always up and it's extremely reliable. Another nice thing is you have offsite data storage. I've had clients that maybe because of Hurricane Sandy and some of the things that have happened lately with the weather and storms, lose access to the data and not quite be sure when they spun those servers back up if they were going to be okay. When you move to Azure, everything's stored in a secure data center, everything's triple redundant, so you really know, you're partnering with AK to kind of manage your data, but on the back end, everything's really hosted by Microsoft in one of their, large state-of-the-art data centers. Okay, and there are a number of people that host GP right now, whether they do it internal on their own networks or they do it through Amazon Web Services or Microsoft Azure. But I think one of the questions you need to ask if someone's going to host your data is whether or not it's going to be multi-tenant. And what multi-tenant means is there's going to be some shared resources. So if you give your GP databases to a hosting partner, are they going to put it on a SQL server with other databases from other clients and kind of share that resource to kind of save money on licensing and computing ability? Or is it going to be dedicated? Well, the short answer is if you host it with AK is your partner, everything's dedicated. There's no shared SQL resource, no shared remote desktop or Active Directory or logins. Everything's unique to your environment, which I think is a really good advantage. It might cost slightly more than some other solutions, but it's not a really big difference. And to me, the peace of mind of knowing that there's no way someone can get a password from another client or another environment and use it against your data and maybe access your critical accounting information, that's critical. Another nice thing is because every environment is unique and dedicated, we can patch, update, and reboot whatever you need to do for your environment on your schedule. You'll see other partners and other applications when they're in the cloud, hey, this weekend you're going to get upgraded whether you like it or not, or next weekend we're going to do some maintenance and your server's going to be down for 6 hours on Saturday and you don't really have any say. With AK, we'll put out a maintenance schedule. We'll say we're going to do some quarterly updates this Saturday. Does that work for you? If not, we'll schedule it for a following week. It's not a big deal to us. And again, other things can be unique. Once you share resources, you might have to share, maybe backup retention policies or password policies or file retention and space. Everything that we do, if you want super long passwords, if you want to retain databases for backups for 2 years, we can work that up front. We have sort of a standard set of things we do here, but everything is going to be unique to your environment. And that's, really a big advantage of being in a dedicated environment. I think probably the feature that end users like the most is what I would call, one-stop support. If you're someone working in GP and you click on a window and you don't get the expected result, maybe no window pops up afterwards, or you get an error message that looks cryptic, or maybe your instance crashes or locks up, it's very frustrating for the user. And on top of that is they don't even know who to call. Do I call my own IT internal support people? Do I reach out to AK? Because I know they do some work for us. Do I try to open a support case with Microsoft and go through their, support mechanism? The good news is when we host your data, your GP environment in Azure, it's sort of a one-stop support desk. You have two choices: either send an email to our help desk, and that generates the support case, and we track that internally through CRM, or you can go to our portal and open a case and fill in the information as appropriate. It seems like for most users, they really like to just send out an email, put a little information in, and open the case that way rather than go to our portal and log in. But you have either option. And the nice thing about it is, some support cases require someone on the infrastructure side of thing, or on the GP application or reporting side, or maybe somebody with some very unique customization skills. You just send it to our help desk, they route it to the right person. We not only support GP, we support Management Reporter, but we support third-party products, like if you're using Macorma Micro for check printing, if you're using something like PaperSave for document management, if you're doing integrations in Smart Connect, we support the whole application and any third-party products. And I think that's a big advantage. I think I touched on this a little earlier. One of the huge advantages of leveraging, Microsoft's Azure cloud environment and partnering with Microsoft is, they have these tremendously redundant, well-built, thought-out, mature data centers. with servers, switches, UPSs, generators. It's extremely seamless right now. We started doing this, I think, a little over 4 years ago. And every now and again, it would seem like one of your virtual machines was rebooted without you being aware of it, or something was down for maybe a few minutes or hours, not even hours, but maybe a few minutes here or there. It was kind of unexpected, and you might have had similar experiences maybe if you were using, Exchange Online or SharePoint Online 4 or 5 years ago. Well, these days, I can't think in the last few years of any time there's been any downtime due to something on the Microsoft end. It's really become extremely stable, extremely available. And essentially, when we take your data, we spin up an environment in Azure using their infrastructure as a service. So we spin up virtual machines and switches and network security groups and storage accounts to kind of mirror what you do on site. So one of the things I get asked a lot is, we have Smart Connect, we have integrations to SQL and some flat files. Can we do that in Azure? And the answer is yes. We have 3 customizations and a unique SSRS report. Can we have that in Azure? And the answer is yes. Essentially, we can mirror anything you're doing on premise in Azure, and it'll be just that much more reliable, actually. And I think one of the things AK does well as a company, there are a lot of hosting providers out there. And I think what they do is they very tightly monitor your account. And as soon as you use a little more disk space, or as soon as you have a little more throughput or bandwidth usage than what they anticipate, they try to hit you with a bill, and they refer back to a contract that you didn't really understand when you signed it. And your fixed monthly fee just went up by 10 or 20%. In the time we've been hosting GP for our clients, I don't think we've increased anyone's billing because of storage utilization or data throughput or anything like that. Essentially, we give you a price, we tell you what that price is for a certain number of users, and then we really try to stick with it. The only thing that we really would bill for is if there's a project, like you want to implement a new module or you need a new custom report created, and that would be just like if you had GP on premise. That would be done on a time and material basis. If you want to set up a new company and that company was going to be based out of the UK and you had to set up, a VAT tax invoice, something like that, that would not be included in your fixed monthly fee. But as long as you're just using GP, open up normal support cases, asking us to refresh a test database, things of that nature, that's all included with your monthly fee, and that should never really change as best we can. Yeah, and another nice advantage is, we have some clients that maybe they have one main office, everybody works from that office, and no one, really accesses GP after hours or remotely. So having GP on premise probably works pretty fine for them. But in today's business model, I think there's typically maybe a main office, maybe just a number of satellite offices. Quite a few times there's people working from home or working from Starbucks on the fly. And an advantage to having GP hosted in the Azure cloud is, it's very democratic. People get access from anywhere they are. As long as you have a good internet connection, you can access GP. And we can limit that. We could set it up so it's just maybe available to people within your office and they have to VPN to your office if they want to work remotely. Or we can open up, like I said, to satellite offices, home offices, the entire internet, Starbucks. Everything's done encrypted in a secure manner. But we can even lock that down more by making it just very specific to an office location or more. And another nice advantage is, with Azure, it's just incredibly easy for us to spin up another machine. If we need a test environment, we can spin up one or more servers very quickly. The cost is relatively minimal, and you just pay for what you use. So if we had a project come up, and someone said, hey, Bill, could you spin up a server, restore the databases to it, and we need to test something for a week or two before we go live with this in production, literally spinning up a server, backing up your data and restoring that to the server and having you test it, you'd only get billed for those couple weeks that server was up and running, and we could shut it down during off hours. So say you knew that environment would only be accessed from 9 to 5 Monday through Friday, then you'd only incur that kind of billing. So it's really very granular and scalable, depending on what your needs are. So I think at this point, Petra, you were going to open it up to questions. I don't know if anyone's proposed any yet, but Ed and I are here right now, and we have a little more time available to field those questions if you have any.
Yep. We don't have any questions quite yet. Oh, yep, there we go.
All right.
You guys ready?
Yes.
Bill,
Yes.
Ed, you guys ready? Okay,
Yep.
awesome. Are most third parties ready for 2018?
I'm not aware of any that aren't at this point. I think to be third-party compliant with Microsoft, you have to be ready within 3 to 6 months, and it's over 6 months now. So the few that I've worked with, or the few that I would be concerned about, because they're pretty involved third-party products like Binary Streams MEM solution, that's been available for quite a while. And I think most of the sort of lighter, smaller ones like McCormick Micro were available within weeks after the rollout of 2018. So I would double check anything if I had a specific question about a third
Right.
party, but yeah, I'm not aware of any that aren't available right now.
Yeah, neither have I.
Thank you, guys. As a reminder, you can use the control panel on the right-hand side to type in your question and just hit send. Okay, here's another one for you. Is there upgrade path 2010 to GP 2018 issues? Are there any issues for the upgrade path 2018 to GP 2018?
Not really. So on a very high level, when you upgrade GP, what you need to do, you can never skip more than one version. So to get to 2010, depending what the current build of your 2010s, we'd probably have to apply a service pack to 2010, and then probably go to 2013, and then go to 2016, and then go to 2018, something like that. There'd be like 3 or 4 skips, and you'd have to have probably 2 or 3 instances of SQL. I'd have to look at the specifics because certain versions of GP only allow you to upgrade on certain versions of SQL. So you'd have to have a couple SQL instances and a couple versions of GP, and then what you do is kind of back up and restore the databases between the versions, run the upgrade utilities, and sort of document that process. So it takes a while perhaps to go. It's not as quick as going straight from 2015 R2 to 2018, but it's not a whole lot different. The process is the same. It's just kind of repeated a few times to get you to where you need to be.
Great, thank you. All right, we've got a few more minutes. If you guys have any other questions? All right. And if anything comes up, I mean, if you think of a question that you weren't able to ask, or while we have Bill and Ed right here, you can shoot it to us after the call to your customer success manager. So speaking of which, in terms of call to action here, if something sparked your interest, if you're interested in learning more, please reach out to your customer success manager, Jenny. Oh, I'm so sorry. We have a couple more questions. Contact info for 8KA. We will touch on that very quickly. I'll just pull that up right now. Jenny Lowry, customer success manager, and Steve Herbst, customer success manager, right there on the screen. So shoot that down, take that down. Another question for you guys: is Dynad ready for 2018? That's a great question.
You know, I haven't done a 2018 upgrade of Dynad. I don't think there's huge changes between 2016 R2 and 2018. So I'd have to find out from Claudia or one of our developers. I haven't done a Dynad upgrade to 2018, but I'd say it wouldn't be a big deal to get it there. It may need to be tested, I'm not sure, but I don't think there are huge changes between the latest build of Dynad for 2016 and 2018. But I can find that out. Jenny, if you let me know who asked that question, I'll find out.
Yep, I will shoot that to you after the call.
Yeah, I haven't done one of those upgrades yet that involve Dynad, but I'm pretty certain that it's either there or so close it's really not an issue.
Awesome. Great. We've got 10 minutes left in the hour. I'll give it just another couple minutes for last questions. Otherwise, again, please, if any of this has sparked your interest, please reach out to Jenny or Steve, depending on who your customer success manager is. We have a detailed What's New GP 2018 PDF we can offer you, which goes a little bit more granular. Or if you want to schedule a demo to actually see the system in action, please reach out to Jenny or Steve as well. You know, last time I moved on to the slides, another couple questions came in. Last call.
Can me and Ed bounce in like you did for Jenny and Steve next time? I like that.
Yeah, yeah. How come we didn't get to bounce?
I mean, we were just.
Sorry, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just kind of were there. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yep, next time we'll have you bounce in.
Thank you.
Yep, no problem. All right. Well, I believe that's all the questions for today. Again, Bill, I'll let you know who asked the Dynad one after the call. Thank you, everyone, so much for joining us today. Thank you, Bill and Ed, for taking us through that presentation. You'll be receiving a follow-up email, everyone on the call, with a link to the recording of today's webinar in the next few business days. If you have any other questions, again, please reach out to Jenny or Steve at the email address or phone number on your screen. Thank you again for joining us, and have a great rest of your day, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Petra. Bye-bye.